Today, I am joined by an incredibly talented and inspiring actress, singer, and writer who has many albums out as well. Introducing Julie Benko. She is a very funny girl. She is the greatest star, and nobody is ever going to rain on her parade. She's marching her band out on Broadway, portraying the role of Fanny Brice in Funny Girl. Hey, Mr. Arnstein, here she is. She's joining me on The Inspiration Show. Hello, gorgeous. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. What a great introduction.
Thank you. Do I have your permission to post this episode of The Inspiration Show on social media?
You do.
Thank you. So, you are an incredible singer and actress. When did you discover that that was a passion?
I always loved singing, and I always thought that I always asked my mom for voice lessons, and she was like, no, like, she was just like, you're not, um, you don't have talent. Like, your friend Sarah, who lives down the street, she's a good singer. But then when I was studying for my bat mitzvah, my cantor said to her, "No, I actually like because I'd been working with him, and he was like, she has some talent, so you should get her voice lessons." So I started taking voice lessons around 13, 14, and been singing nonstop ever since.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. What inspired you to become a performer and who has been an inspiration of yours throughout your career?
Some of my earliest heroes were Judy Garland and Julie Andrews, and I just love everything they've ever done, really. And I didn't really think about becoming a performer until I was in my freshman year of high school, and I auditioned for the local JCC's production, The Fiddler on the Roof, and the woman who directed that production, and my whole family was in this show. In the end, like my dad was Red Mordechai, the innkeeper, and my sister was Bielka, and my mom would sold the bagels, and but this lady uh, who was the director became my first acting teacher, and she ended up working with me for my monologues for college, and she was the one who sat me down when I was about 14 and said, "I think you could do this if you wanted." And that was the first time I sort of got the idea.
It's amazing how a passion and your family and some people who believe in you and who have seen your talent can really push you to do what you love and it can become a whole career. And when you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life.
That's what they say. That's what they say. I do think, I love what I do, and I'm very dedicated to it. But, it does require work, and there are days where it's hard, and there are days where it doesn't feel easy. And, so it's that you do have to cultivate a practice of working through the times when it's difficult and you don't like it, and I do think many actors, myself included, or artists, any artist, find themselves, because the life can be difficult, is constantly asking themselves, do I still want to do this? Should I be doing something else? And most of us have done some other job, or have done, side hustles, or other careers at the same time, or go to law. Like, I have a friend in law school who is also still auditioning, and so it's always a question that you have to keep revisiting to go, is this really what I want? Because the life can be trying. It's just because you go these long periods where sometimes you don't work for a long time, or you don't get auditions, you don't get callbacks, and it can be very discouraging. So that part is hard. But then once you're actually up there acting and singing and stuff, that part's the fun part.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like taking a look at Fanny, like I don't play Fanny myself, but I could imagine how vocally challenging and demanding a role like that is. But when you're on the August Wilson stage and taking a bow, I can't imagine what that feels like.
It's amazing. It's really the best feeling in the world. And it's also kind of amazing. I sometimes, like recently, I had a cold, and then I had this cough that wouldn't go away. And I was worried about doing the show because I was like, I'm better. Like, I'm not sick, but this lingering cough. And I would cough and cough and cough. And then I would get on stage and I would not cough, and it was kind of amazing. You're like, wow, like adrenaline, the human body, does incredible things. And I think it's a mixture of adrenaline and just feeling like when I step out on stage, it's like where I'm meant to be. I feel very at ease. I feel like the audience is my friend. I feel like I can also just sink into the support of all of my training and that it can hold me, you know. It's a wild feeling. There's nothing else like it.
Yeah, and it's like a whole new world. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
portrayed the role of Fanny Brice on Broadway in Funny Girl. Funny Girl tells the story of Fanny Brice, who was a comedian, illustrated
Mhm.
song model, singer, and theater and film actress who made many stage, radio, and film appearances. She is also the creator and star of the radio comedy series The Baby Snook Show. What about Fanny stands out to you, and what made you passionate to portray her and tell her story?
I think Fanny was a trailblazer in so many ways. And at a time when there were not female comics, let alone female Jewish comics, it was pretty remarkable that she was able to carve out this space for herself and create so many beloved characters and become such a huge icon. I mean, she was just the most famous person of the time, you know, and she was just so wildly successful, and she didn't have a great education. She left school when she was young, middle school, you know, and she and yet through just dedication, willpower, drive, um she built a life for herself, and not just a life in the career, you know, in the theater, uh in the theater, as we say, but, you know, an incredibly successful career, and was the breadwinner for her family. And when Nick Arnstein left her, I mean, even when she was with Nick Arnstein, she was the breadwinner for the family. Um, he would always take her money and lose it. And but when he left her, he walked out and did not see his children again for a long time. He left the family, not just her, and uh, she was, you know, charged with taking care of her, you know, providing for her children, and she was a mother uh, and a successful performer at the same time. And I don't, you know, I think it's she was she was able to do all of the things. You know, she was one of the first women, modern women that we really see, who was able to do it all, and she never sacrificed who she was. And I really admire that about her, because she was always known for being kind, for being warm, for being fun to be around. Everybody liked her, and she was never considered to be a diva or demanding or cruel in any way. And the fact that she managed to achieve the heights that she did without sacrificing the warmth and the kindness that she always had, I think is remarkable. Because I don't, you know, I don't always think that that kind of behavior is rewarded in the, you know, in media. And she made it work, and she was a very classy, gracious lady her whole life. And so I think that's quite inspiring, and something that I look up to and hope to emulate.
She is such an inspiration. And I know from being on the media, a lot of people don't realize that Fanny was a real person and that Funny Girl tells the story of her life. And I believe that all theater is magical, but when you get to tell someone's true story and share their life in theater, it's so magical to keep their story and their legacy alive.
Yeah, I think the number of people who tell I hear every day on my TikTok, I was today years old when I discovered
Yeah.
Fanny Brice was a real person. It's yeah, people don't always know, and I think, you know, Fanny Brice is the first real person I've played as an actor, and I feel that um, I feel that duty to her, and wanting to honor her legacy. And I think about her, and, you know, wanting her to, you know, if she were looking on, I would hope that she would feel that her legacy was being celebrated and honored, and that she was being represented in a way that she would feel good about. I do think about that, and I think about inviting her on stage with me when I walk out there.
That's incredible. Can you share with us what your favorite part and most challenging part is about portraying Fanny?
I think my favorite part about playing Fanny is that you get to show so many different aspects of yourself, and you get to be silly, you get to be vulnerable, you get to be strong and fiery, you get to show so many different colors of yourself and not ever be boxed into one idea or one archetype. She's a very complex person, and I get to show that as an actor and vocally, and I get to use all different kinds of colors in my voice. um I don't just belt the whole show. I really try to have a lot of, approach every song as with nuance, and approach everything through this as an actor, and not just as a belter. So I love that about playing Fanny. You just get to use every part of you. And um, I think the most challenging part about playing Fanny is pacing yourself. And um, especially when I was doing 8 shows a week, every moment outside of the show, I was basically preparing to be on stage and dealing with, oh, I have an ache here or a pain there. And your muscles get, you pull a something here, or your voice is tired and people they want attention. Your friends want to see you and you're like, I can't socialize. I'm sorry. I just have to take any time I have to rest, because you're just constantly tired, and learning how to do the show when you're tired. So that was quite a challenge. And now the challenge is keeping it keeping it in me, even though I only go on once a week, and making sure that I'm ready, at the drop of a hat.
You are just so incredible. Can you share with us your favorite song and scene from the show?
I think my favorite song is the finale, because I get to basically go back to the beginning and relive the journey, and basically plunge all the way to the depths of despair, and then fight my way out of it and reclaim this feeling of, um I mean, really get to look in the mirror and say, hey, gorgeous, and say, you did, you're worthy, and celebrate that, and then fight as I basically learn to accept and love myself. I mean, I just think it's a really powerful, wonderful message. And so it's a really fun and satisfying. I mean, fun in it, it's, I'm crying or whatever, but it's a very satisfying song and scene to play as an actor. So I think both song and scene,
Yeah.
just that is, and I mean, just as a song, I probably Cornet Man
Yeah.
or music that makes me dance are such fun songs. But I just think that finale is really where it's at.
Yeah, I love watching finales of shows because, reflecting on the like first act and then the second act, the finale really takes you through the whole journey again. But it does it in the blink of an eye, and it's like a time lapse of everything that you saw, and it like sinks in after.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would like to dive into your creative process while preparing for the role, because in an interview you mentioned that you never saw Funny Girl, and it felt kind of freeing for you because you were able to approach the role in your own way. And now, having portrayed Fanny over 50 times, how does it make you feel to know that your portrayal wasn't influenced by any past actors who portrayed the role?
Well, it's actually been 80 times, I think.
Whoa.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think I have seen the movie A Funny Girl one time. I saw it after I got a call back. I was like, I should watch this movie. So I did watch the movie once. And then I've seen clips here and there of Sheridan Smith and some other actors who have played Fanny over the years. I've seen clips here and there. I even saw Heather Headley singing People when she was a senior in high school, she was amazing. Um, so I have seen little bits and pieces. And I also, I watched Beanie do it a lot. I've seen Leah do it. I think but I do think ultimately I always went back to Fanny Brice as who I was trying to uh, honor, you know. But I think the thing about Barbara Streisand is that she's embedded into the material because the role was created for her. So I think there parts of it are gonna they're in there. They're in there anyway. Although you know I was told by the music director, he was like, we're not going to sing the vocal lines that Barbara Streisand came up with. We're going to sing the notes on the page that Julie Stein wrote.
Mhm.
He worked for Julie Stein for many years. So he was like, he knew what Julie Stein wanted. So that helped to sort of break out of what Barbara did with the song to make it my own. And then just trying, you know, I think just trying to think about each scene and know, you know, really know what was going on and what was at stake emotionally and invest in where Fanny was in that moment and what was important to her in that moment. And then letting my own natural humor and vulnerability come out through that. You know, I think it was a mixture of, I had watched so many videos of Fanny and listened to her radio and I read books about her. And so taking little bits and pieces from all of that stuff and trying to put it into the physicality or the voice, but then also just going, okay, well, I'm not doing an imitation either. What's healthy in my instrument and what feels good? And I worked with my voice teacher and I worked with some other folks, previous teachers from NYU. I went back and asked for their help, you know, on little things to say, you know, I'm trying to get this to fit in me, and the way this is how Beanie does it, and it's not working for me this way. So how can I find a way that makes it fit me? Because I'm my own actor and I need to come up with my own interpretation, and I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I just have to make it real for me.
It's incredible how, you get to watch all these other actors do it. And it's all not an interpretation, but it's all honoring the same person. And it's amazing to see how you got to bring Julie into Fanny and how you got to make the role your own with your own little spin on it.
Thanks.
So, can you share with us some ways on how Fanny has inspired you?
Yeah, I think, let's see. Fanny was, let me think. What are some ways in which Fanny's inspired me? I mean, there are. It's just, I think the fact that, I mean, we already talked about it a little bit, which is that she was this Jewish comic and sort of fearless. I also think, you know, when I read about her life, you know, I think the way that the musical really portrays her is that like she from a young age, like she has this amazing success and then she rockets to stardom and then she stays successful. That's sort of how there's just a lot. It's like 15 years. You have to get it into 2.5 hours. But the real Fanny took a long time to figure things out. And she had some early success. And then after that early success, you know, happened, she had this long period where she had some trouble getting work, and or she had to go on tour, or she had to do sort of other things, and she wasn't getting the kinds of work, you know, she wasn't getting the kind of work she wanted to. And she really had to go and work to find the material that worked for her, and she had to find her own uh composers and say, do you have anything for me? You know, do you have, you know, material that you can write for me? And so I think it was very inspiring just to know that it didn't just happen like that for her. She didn't just wake up and become you know, a comic genius. It actually took her a long time of working on the road. She actually was an understudy at one point. Developing her craft so that by the time she had her sort of second round of success and she was a little bit older and she'd now had a period of time where she didn't work, it's like she had really developed her craft. And so I find that, you know, very inspiring for me. Like I went back to grad school in my late 20s and to keep working on my craft and developing it. And I think you're never ever done studying that. And you know, I'm always trying to go back to classes and work on things with people who are better at all of that stuff than I am, because it really is a craft. So I get a lot of inspiration from Fanny in that way. And I love knowing that she wasn't actually an overnight success, because neither was I.
Yeah.
I've
There's
been at this a while.
Yeah, there's this quote that I heard and it really stuck with me. It says, "Dreams don't work unless you do." And a lot of in the times in the media, you hear like how this person became an overnight success, or but you don't hear the work that they put in and how they got to where they are today. Because a lot of incredible actors that we see on Broadway, for example, were standbys just like you, and they were understudies. And then when you get to see and hear about where they are now, it's incredible to learn about all the hard work that it takes.
Yeah, I know. I mean, when Sutton Foster became a quote unquote, overnight success, and actually, she had been in many Broadway shows and tours, and she had been working for, I think, almost a decade by the time on Broadway. By the time she had her became her an overnight success.
Yeah. So, alongside from portraying the role of Fanny, you have many songs and albums as well, including introducing Julie Benko and your most recent album, Hand in Hand. What influences you when creating music?
Probably, sorry, it's probably Jason, my spouse Jason, is the biggest influence because he's my main collaborator. Um, uh, he would bring so many songs to the table, suggestions. But then so would I. I mean, on our album, we do a mix of things. He's a jazz pianist, so we have all these jazz songs. He wrote this song called "Sweet Pea," which is a dedication to Billy Strayhorn, the great jazz composer who was Duke Ellington's right hand man, and he wrote "You Must Take the A Train," which is often attributed to Duke Ellington. And so we do that song on the album. And I've gotten much more jazz influenced since Jason has come into my life, because he's exposed me to so many artists that I had never heard of. And, I spend a lot more time in jazz clubs downtown or wherever, on the scene. And I didn't even know that these places existed before him. So I've certainly gone more in the jazz direction since meeting him. But then on the album, we also do these Broadway tunes um, that I found, all I've ever known from Hadestown and Another Life from Bridges of Madison County. So we've sort of met in the middle. And then there are other songs like Gainesville, which is by Randy Newman, who wrote this sort of musical theater oratorio, but it's jazzy because it's sort of New Orleans music. So, we found some places where we also met in the middle. But, Jason's solo projects or his trio records or various things tend to be more like jazz man jazz, and it's like, and that's not what we do. We do a more lyric driven act, from I approach every song as an actor, because that's what my training is. And I enjoy interpreting music to be an extension of an emotion, or, uh, uh, it's an expression of something. So for me, that's where I come from. So, he pulls me that way. I pull him this way. He's like, let's do it like this. And I'm like, well, what's the lyric say? What are we trying to get out of this? Who's the character who's speaking, and what are we trying to get from it? So, I would say, um, yeah, the process is very give and take in that way, where we're constantly influencing each other.
I love how you both bring your strengths and your thoughts into like a table and you talk about it, and it's just so amazing to see what you can create.
Yeah, it's really especially, I mean, it's especially sweet that it really just happens in our living room. It's we don't have to go anywhere to do it. Um, of course, that makes it harder at times, because sometimes when you're just there, you don't make the time. It's like a little harder when it's just at home and you just have to specifically say, no, now we're gonna rehearse. We're not just gonna sit in our pajamas eating cereal or whatever.
I love that. So, as you mentioned, your most recent album titled Hand in Hand came out in August, which you created alongside your husband, Jason. You created this album during COVID-19 quarantine, and you mentioned that Jason was your sole music collaborator as you were quarantined together. Can you share with us what your process was like while creating Hand in Hand?
Yeah, so we were doing this series called Quarantunes, which was a weekly Facebook Live and Instagram Live concert, and we would, sing for tips, and then we would pick a different charity every week. We would donate half the tips to a different charity, and whatever was sort of going on that week, or certain charities were local, some were more international, but we would we would do songs, and we would get requests from people, and sometimes we didn't know what you know what the song was. Like we do this Janis Joplin song on the record, um Mercedes Benz, and uh we had gotten this request from a family friend, can you do this? And we are like, we don't know it, we'll go away and learn it and come back. And then the next week we had Mercedes Benz, we were like, this song is awesome. And then some of the songs we had been playing together for a decade, like Nearness of You was just a standard that we'd both been doing together over the years. And um, other songs, sort of cropped up over our time together. And every song we ended up picking at some point while we were doing Quarantunes, Jason was like, we should record these. And so we picked our favorites and songs that meant a lot to us. And, me, myself, and I, we learned when we were on our first trip to New Orleans, and Jason was thrown onto the bandstand and sat in with the band and didn't know that song and learned it on the fly. And that became a very special song for us. Very representative of our love of New Orleans. And that's why we do it in a New Orleans jazz style. So, we just picked our favorites and we went into the studio and we had a lot of fun. We just were like being very creative. It was very freeing because the last record we did together, which was my first record, was, bigger, there were just more band. And so the arrangements had to be set. You get into the recording studio, and the clock is ticking, and you're limited, and time is money, and so you need to be super prepared. And there's a little less, I think, opportunity for just go with the flow, see what comes. But with this, because it was just the two of us and there wasn't really an arrangement per se, we could really play around and say, let's just try it this way. And so we'd come out with certain songs we did, me, myself, and I, and Nearness of You, and certain other songs we did in so many different ways. And the takes were so different. And so choosing one was kind of hard because you're like, well, they're very different takes on the same material.
That's what I love about music. It's because when you hear a piece that has been released and then the artist decides to share like a snippet of them in the studio, you can hear how different it is. And like you said, it's the same material, but it can outcome so beautifully and so different. And it's such a masterpiece.
Thanks.
If you had to choose one song to represent you, what would it be?
Ooh, that's hard. Um, I don't know. Maybe my first thought was Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So let's go with that.
I love that so much. You have inspired so many theater kids, including myself, and not just theater kids, but people everywhere. You have taught us so many important lessons, but most importantly, to not let anyone rain on your parade. Looking back on everything that you have achieved in this industry, what advice would you give to your younger self entering the industry? And what advice would you give to people who feel like bagels on a plate full of onion rolls?
I would say I would give the same advice that Christine Toy Johnson, who is an excellent actor, she's on the Come From Away tour right now, and also an incredible writer and has written a number of plays and other projects. And she's on the Dramatists Guild. Anyway, she works there. She is very inspiring to me because she creates, all this. She's a writer, and she never limited herself in terms of just thinking of herself in one lane, and uh the advice she gave to me when I said I can't write, it's just too overwhelming. I sit down and I look at a blank page and I just get discouraged, or I try to write something and then I look back at it the next day and I just think it's terrible. And the advice she gave me was 10 minutes a day. Just do 10 minutes a day and do it every day. Don't take any days off, not weekends, nothing. And that was the best advice I ever got. So I give that advice to everyone, because it really, and it does, it can apply to whatever you want to do. If it's writing, if it's acting, if it's learning a new instrument, if it's exercising, like whatever it is that you want to do, I think we can all really get in our own ways when we look at the enormity of something, or we get frustrated at ourselves for not being at a certain level quickly enough. And um, it's just about cultivating a practice and sticking with it. And the more hours that you put into something, eventually, like, the better you're just going to get better at it. The more you do something, the more you know about it. And once you know it, it's not hard. So it just takes a long time to get to know things sometimes. And for me, 10 minutes a day was very useful, because if one day doesn't go great, you go, well, I stared at my blank page for 10 minutes, and I'll show up again tomorrow. And so it's no big deal if it didn't go great today. Um, and then sometimes 10 minutes becomes 60 minutes, or 120 minutes, or 180 minutes. It's like sometimes 10 minutes turns into 3 hours, and you're like, where did the time go? And you just, you get on a roll. And then sometimes it's not like that. So just set a timer. And if your day doesn't go great today, that's fine. It will go better tomorrow. And just, um, write and be creative and trust your voice. Um, it will not be ready, today. It may not be ready today, but it will be ready if you keep showing up.
Yeah, going back to what we said earlier, it won't be an overnight success. You have to take the
Yeah,
time, really never give up and work
yeah,
hard, and you see what it turns into. It's truly amazing.
truly, truly. 10 minutes a day adds up, you know?
Thank you so much, Julie, for taking the time to join me on the Inspiration Show. It was such an honor and a dream come true to speak with you. Thank you for having such a positive impact on my life and for inspiring
Oh,
me.
well, thank you for having me, and Monkey's very grateful as well that he could be
I
here.
know.
Aren't you? Aren't you great? Very grateful.
Thank you so much.